think it's interesting to just read some of these things. Sunnis are the biggest by far. About 85% of the Muslims in the world are Sunnis. 800 million worldwide followers of Abu, called Sunni because they accepted the Sunnahs, which are the oral traditions and interpretations of the Quran after Muhammad's death. Later, these editions were called Hadiths. Okay, so that's where they get their name, Sunnis. Now, do you understand the difference? I mean, the Quran is the written word in front of them, and then the traditions that developed after Muhammad died were the Hadiths or the Sunnahs. And they had to do with the Prophet's life, how he lived his life, the choices he made, and some of the stories that were related to the choices that he made. You can imagine it's a little bit like the Pharisees in the New Testament. They had more of an oral tradition, so they were more progressive. They were more liberal. Yeah, I suppose you could say it is. The Talmud is probably very similar to that. Yeah. They believe that the caliph or successor of Muhammad should always be elected, not conferred by heredity. They claim that they are the true followers of the faith, and until 1959 they refused to recognize the Shias or Shiites as true Muslims. They believe in predestination. During the reign of the Ottoman Turks, the caliphs were also called sultans. Now, this is where it's going to get more specific with the Shiites. There's 100 million of them. We know more about them. In Iraq, they were the majority, right? They were held in check because Saddam Hussein was a dictator, and he had a Ba'athist party that kept them in check, but they certainly didn't run the country. They are also prevalent in Iran and Palestine. Shiites created the office of the Imam, which is a leader or guide. Now, there's a couple of different ways that this gets used. The Imam can be the guy at the local mosque that leads the prayers on Friday, but it also can be this larger-than-life figure that you see among the Shiites. The Imam was infallible or sinless. There was one for each generation, the only source of religious instruction and guidance, and all of them were direct descendants of Ali. There were 12 imams after Ali. The last one, the 12th, went into hiding in 940 CE. And the belief is that he will emerge later to rule the world as Mahdi, or Messiah, or Savior. Coming back. He's going to come back as Savior, and everything will be good. Now, because it's complicated, they couldn't just have 12. There had to be an offshoot. And so, when it came to the 7th imam, that became a split. And these people, there was an imam that died, but the rumor went around that he really didn't die. And he went into hiding as well. So there's two different traditions of Shiites. There's the 12ers or the 7ers. The 12ers went with 12 imams, and then when they got to the 12th, that was the hidden imam, or the Mahdi that was going to return. In this tradition, they basically stopped at 7, and that became the hidden imam, who was going to return someday as imam and as savior and make all things right. So you're a 7er or a 12er if you're an imam, or if you're a Shiite. Now it's interesting, the present ayatollahs, such as in Iran, see themselves as joint caretakers of the office of imam until he returns at the end of time. Ayatollah Khomeini claimed that he was a descendant of the 7th imam and hence the rightful ruler of the Shiites. So we still have imams around. We still have an office of the imam around. But there was a certain element of this, component of this, that ended with the 7 or 12. Complicated, isn't it? Yeah, but so is Christianity, by the way.
Yes.
Okay, she's saying there's a lot of people that claim to be descendants of Ali, and they wear white turbans around their head in honor of that. Yeah, interesting. A lot. Well, you can get a lot after a while, I suppose. And and think about it. You know, the death of his son is being commemorated every year. And so if you're commemorating these kind of things, you're going to spend a lot of time wondering about genealogy and who's a rightful heir. Yeah, good question. Let's go on to just a few more things before we're done. The Wahhabis are interesting. They were a small group founded in the 18th century in Saudi Arabia. They are the Puritans of the Muslims with the most strict, severely enforced moral standards of conduct. They're the ones that call for people to have their hands chopped off. They call for pure Islam regulated by a literal interpretation of the Quran. Again, just like with Christianity, how one interprets the Quran leads to various sects and traditions. Same with Christianity, doesn't it? And of course, their most famous adherent is Osama bin Laden. The Baathists, they're not nearly as much in power these days. Syria, Lebanon, some in Iraq, the secular socialist party of Saddam Hussein. The Sufis have been interesting over time. They were the mystics. They were the kind of middle-of-the-road mystics, a lot of love. It could have been hippies, I think, if they'd lived in the 60s. Their primary goal is to rid the souls of self-love and replace it with God's love. They tend to be much more tolerant of other religions. The Sufis just made it easier to be around Islam, when a lot of times that was, it was hard to put cultures together with Islam. The Sufis made it easier, I think, by allowing for a blending of traditions. And I threw that in the whirling dervish, a twirl dance used as a means of achieving oneness with God. It said to require 101 hours to master the dance. A little bit like square dancing. And then there's some information about black Muslims, which you can read. We hear about people like Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They've been part of that black Muslim tradition, which doesn't have to do with the color of their skin so much as their brand, their version of Islam being filtered through the Nation of Islam. Okay?
The relationship of the Wahhabis and the royal family in Saudi Arabia.
Doesn't say.
I think the royal family tends to look the other way. You know, I think if you are in Saudi Arabia, you know where you know what your goose is and who's laying the golden egg. And so, I think by and large, the Wahhabis do what they do and operate the country with as much influence as they can, but there's always concessions made for the royal family and the kind of choices that they make. Because that's where all the money is, that's where all the power is. We do that today in this country too. We do.